to Lyons High School today and to our Veterans Day Assembly. As we get started, our Air Force Junior ROTC cadets will be coming down the middle aisle and will be seated. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Cadet Master Sergeant Marshall Schottler. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome each of you here today and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Please rise for the presentation of the colors and the playing of our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. This coming Monday is Veterans Day, and we're here today to honor every American veteran, both the living and the dead. While this national holiday is meant to honor the living veterans and to give recognition and thanks for their sacrifices, every veteran finds it a time of reflection for what was, of what is, and what could have been for those brothers in arms that are no longer with us. Each veteran knows how truly fortunate we are to live in America, a country founded upon the principles of freedom. World War I, known as the time of the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles outside the town of Versailles, France. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice, or temporary cessation of hostilities, between Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. For that reason, November 11, 1918 is generally regarded as the war to end all wars. President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day with the following words. To us in America, the reflection of Armistice Day will be filled with a solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in their country's service and its gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunities given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nations. The original concept for the celebration was, for a day, observed with parades and public meetings, and a brief suspension of business beginning at 11 a.m. The United States Congress officially recognized the end of World War I when it passed a concurrent resolution on June 4, 1926. An act approved by Congress on May 13, 1938, made the 11th of November in each year a legal holiday, a day to be dedicated to the cause of world peace and to be thereafter celebrated known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I, but in 1954, World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in the nation's history. After American forces had fought off aggression in Korea, the 83rd Congress, at the urging of veteran service organizations, amended the Act of 1938 by striking out the word armistice and inserting in its place the word veterans. With the approval of this legislation on June 1, 1954, November 11th became a day to honor American veterans of all wars. No matter if you served in the Army, the Navy, Marines, Air Force, or Coast Guard, we are forever grateful for what you have sacrificed for us. Your sweat and tears are not forgotten. In your honor, we will play each of the 5 service songs. We invite you to stand at attention momentarily to recognize as your service song is played. U.S. Air Force, retired. Colonel Gaines graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1968, earning his bachelor's degree in economics. He also holds 2 master's degrees in Latin American Affairs from the University of Arizona and National Security Affairs from the U.S. Air Force Air War College. Colonel Gaines was a career aviator, having logged 3,500 flying hours in various aircraft, including the OV-2, the OV-10, the F-111, and the EF-111, and served as a combat forward air controller in Vietnam. He also directed the operation for the 27th Fighter Wing, the largest organization of its kind in the Department of Defense. Additionally, he held several positions in planning and developing policy and strategy for North American air defense, as well as planning for Central European air operations for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Colonel Gaines served our nation for 3 decades with several tours throughout the U.S., Southeast Asia, Central America, and Europe. Please give a warm welcome to Colonel Gaines.
Thank you very much, Marshall. Good morning. As Cadet Shelton just mentioned, today honors veterans, both living and dead, and that's the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. In May, we recognize those who have given their lives in the service of our country. In November, we honor those who have fallen and those who are still with us today. With few exceptions, only someone who has raised their hand and taken the oath of allegiance to our country to support and defend the Constitution of the United States really knows what it's like to go into harm's way for others. No nation can truly say they believe in the freedoms if they ever forget the veterans' sacrifices. For the students in this auditorium, I draw your attention to the veterans sitting here with you today. When many of these folks were your age, they came face to face with enemies who wanted to destroy them for their stance against oppression and terrorism. Your freedom to learn, to protest, and to improve your lives is solid today because these men and women thought it right, considered it worth fighting for, and made it a reality. So my first point to you this morning is that Veterans Day is about devotion to something bigger than yourself. More than 50 million Americans have served our country since 1776. There are now over 22 million veterans living and over 50 million family members and survivors of those veterans. Almost 1 in every 3 American families is either a veteran or a member of a veteran's family. 227,000 are from Kansas, 831 are from right here in Rice County. Whether they served in time of war or peace, American veterans all share a common bond, their unwavering belief in the cause of freedom. A belief so strong we're all willing to give our lives, if need be, in its defense. Sadly, over 1 million have made that sacrifice in combat or combat-related events. Day to day, it's easy to forget that right now, there are men and women on duty in lonely outposts around the world. Our veterans have missed the births of their children, wedding anniversaries, and graduations. They have spent holidays on Pacific atolls in thousands of places throughout Europe, far out at sea, in soggy rice paddies in Vietnam, amid the steaming sands of the Iraqi desert, and in the cold and rugged mountains of Afghanistan. Those births, anniversaries, graduations, and holidays happen at home too. And I think in many ways the wives, children, and parents feel the loneliness as much or more as those out there on the pointy end do. Military service gave these individuals a feeling of commitment that lasts a lifetime. When they put on the uniform, they felt a new sense of responsibility, and they came to understand the price of freedom because they were able to put names and faces to it. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Finzel, a decorated Army Ranger, expressed this so very well a few years ago. Let me read to you what he wrote. He wrote, "I was trying to think of what this day meant to me in high school, and I can't say that it meant much to me growing up. The first time I really understood what a difference our military makes in the world was in a muddy, boggy, and cold Bosnia back in December of 1995. Our airborne battalion had landed on Tuzla Airfield to carry out our mission of disarming the two sides that were fighting and to enforce the shaky peace that was in place. I was a young captain in the battalion visiting the troops guarding the base and positions along the fence of the airfield. There were these small and sturdy homes made of wood and cinder blocks just outside the airfield, and groups of kids were playing soccer on the frozen patchy fields, and I remember they were running around howling with laughter and their breath sort of hung in the cold air. It was really, really cold. I started to notice a woman bringing hot coffee to our soldiers every morning as they stood guard, and after about a week of seeing her do this, I happily took a small cup of her strong coffee and thanked her for going to the trouble. And then I told her she didn't have to do that for us. This proud and weathered woman paused, her eyes filled with tears, and she said, "Before you arrived, my daughter had to hide in the basement every day. Every day. We didn't know what would happen to us next. When you Americans came, the fighting stopped, and now you see my daughter playing soccer there with her friends. So please, at least let me bring you coffee." Many of our friends never lived to wear the title veteran. They died on foreign soil serving our nation. President Ronald Reagan once said, "Most of those who died in defense of our country were boys when they died, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. They gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up everything for us, for their country. All we can do is remember." Point number 3, heroes are normal people with extraordinary qualities inside them. In a world tormented by tension and the constant possibility of conflict, we meet in commemoration of an historic day. In an age that still threatens the survival of freedom, we can join together to honor those who made our freedom possible. The congressional resolution which first proclaimed Armistice Day described November 11, 1918 as the end of the most destructive and far-reaching war in the annals of human history. That resolution expressed the hope that the First World War would be in truth the war to end all wars. Sadly, that was not the case. Beyond Arlington and in the military cemetery above the Normandy beaches, in the Punch Bowl in Hawaii, on the island of Corregidor, and in thousands of cemeteries across this nation lie many more veterans who died for their country in the uniform of the armed forces. And on many other forgotten fields across the face of this earth lie thousands of other American veterans whose names are known but to God. We may not ever know their names, but we will never forget their sacrifice. Never. The nation owes a great debt to its veterans, whose service to the nation expands every decade, every year, every day of our country's existence. America's veterans have secured the liberty which the Founding Fathers sought to establish here in the New World. Whenever and wherever the nation has called, in times of darkness and danger, and in times of peace and prosperity, America's veterans have been there. Through the centuries, America has been a symbol to the world, a symbol of a higher ideal. Millions of people around the world still look to America for the hope and promise of something better. And just as this nation has depended on its veterans in the past to fulfill that hope and secure that promise, we shall surely depend on the new generation as we move into the challenging but bright future which awaits us. I'm referring to some of you students sitting in here today. Not every veteran has seen combat, of course, but even in peacetime they face dangers that most other Americans will never know. Hazardous nighttime training missions in high-speed aircraft, rescuing crew members from downed aircraft, providing relief supplies after a natural disaster, all come with elements of risk. These folks have important jobs to do, and thank goodness we have always had young men and women ready to step forward. Our veterans are living examples of what it means to be good citizens. They have given us a lifetime of service, and the country has been enriched by the contributions both in and out of uniform. Many of these people have become citizen soldiers, and we are increasingly calling on members of the Guard and the Reserve to serve on the front lines of the war on terrorism. We simply could not accomplish this mission without the help of our reserve component. General Omar Bradley said, "In war, there is no prize for runner-up." Never was that more true than in the war on terrorism. The possibility that terrorists may possess deadly chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons is truly an horrific thought. We must confront terrorist networks in more than 60 countries around the world before they confront us here on Main Street again. The stakes are unimaginably high, as we learned on September 11, 2001. There's a special group of veterans which deserves recognition today and every day. I'm speaking of those veterans who fought in Southeast Asia and elsewhere, who are still listed as missing in action. We, the veterans who returned, and indeed all American citizens, have an obligation to account for these missing comrades in arms. We owe this to their families, and we owe it to future generations of Americans, but most of all, we owe it to our missing friends. These then are some of the American veterans whom we have come to honor today. They represent the millions of American men and women who have served the Republic over the past 237 years. Fortunately, this country has been blessed with citizens who have taken up their civic responsibility seriously and have taken arms and marched to the sound of the guns whenever and wherever the rights of man have been threatened. These men and women were not seeking personal gain or even fame. Their country called and they answered. Theirs was a simple, patriotic response. They recognized their civic duty and acted accordingly. Those who survived and are represented here today returned home convinced that they had done something worthwhile, something to make this world a better place to live, and for them that was reward enough. John F. Kennedy once said, "A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors, the men it remembers." And I would add today, women here as well. Wherever this nation is at war or at peace, the vital role of our veterans cannot be overlooked. Peace itself demands continuing effort and renewed commitment by all of those who serve and are still serving. But for us, military strength is not an end in itself. We certainly do not glory in war. Instead, we believe that it is the strength we show as a nation which prevents war and has made possible the unprecedented changes which are unfolding in the world virtually every day. We veterans know better than most that the continued strength of America's military is essential to maintaining the peace. Should we be here today? Should we always have these days of remembrance? I say yes, because the lives of the men and women who have served and are serving today have helped make us a better people. They helped make us a nation of solid citizens founded on principles that transcend self and propel us to do things that are greater than the me in all of us. Their lives, their sacrifices, their presence makes us better and our nation greater. Today we have the opportunity to renew our commitment to this great nation as we remember and honor the American veterans, both living and dead, and their families. So too can we rededicate ourselves to the values they serve. Their devotion to the ideals of peace and freedom should inspire us just as we must inspire the next generation of Americans, including those who are sitting right here among us. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Wagler, Lieutenant Sergeant Escott, and the junior ROTC cadets for putting on this outstanding ceremony. And to all veterans, I say thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice, for your sense of duty, and for your service. Our nation salutes you, and we gathered here today salute you.
Thank you, Colonel Yates, for your remarks. Lieutenant Colonel Wagner, the LHS Junior ROTC Senior Aerospace Science Instructor, would like to make a brief presentation.
Sergeant Eskin and I were talking several weeks ago about needing somebody to address Veterans Day, and then lo and behold, about a week later, you unselfishly offered to help out in whatever way you could at the ball game. Sergeant Eskin and I just looked at each other and go. So a small token of appreciation on behalf of Lyons High School and the Air Force Junior ROTC program here. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us for your service as well.
Thank you very much. That's outstanding.
Ladies and gentlemen, I call to your attention the small table at center stage. It is set for one, symbolizing the fact that members of our military are missing from the ranks. They are referred to as POWs and MIAs, prisoners of war and missing in action. We call them brothers. They are unable to be with their loved ones and families to this day, so we join together to pay our humble tribute to them and to bear witness to their continued absence. Let us remember the United States Army, honored by Cadet Sarah Gregg. Let us remember the United States Navy, honored by Cadet Richard Leatherberry. Let us remember the United States Marine Corps, honored by Cadet Alex Martinez. Let us remember the United States Air Force, honored by Cadet Oscar Gomez. Let us remember the men and women from all branches of service that are too often forgotten. Let us remember them. The table, set for one, is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. The single red rose in the vase signifies the blood they have shed in sacrifice to ensure the freedom of our beloved country. The slice of lemon on the plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt sprinkled on the plate reminds us of the countless volunteers of families as they wait. The glass is inverted because they could not toast with us to this day. The chair is empty. They are not here. The candle is reminiscent of the light of hope, which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation. If you want to thank a veteran, words are nice, but nothing is a greater tribute than for each and every one of you to make a commitment to live a meaningful life, to live with integrity and honor, and to be a part of something greater than yourselves. We wish to thank all of our guests for coming today, and to each of our brave veterans, we salute you. We will close this ceremony with the sounds of an F-18 flyby and 21-gun salute, followed by taps. Our ceremony is concluded following this solemn tribute. Thank you for coming, and God bless America.